check, 1, 2.
Go! Curious about real estate? Yes! Then you've come to the right place. Get the knowledge you need, get over the fear, and get started. This is the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show with your host, Michael Quarles.
Hello everybody, Michael Quarles here. Today's podcast number 7. I wanted to talk a little bit about the differences between wholesaling, assigning, and wholetailing, and how you can turn your wholesaling business into a wholetailing business and make massive amounts of money doing a fraction of the same work. So before we start on what wholetailing is and how it differs from wholesaling and assigning, let's first look at our prospect. We know whether or not we are going to be a wholesaler or a wholetailer that we have to find a prospect who has a house to sell. That house has to have massive amounts of equity, and I consider any house that has 30% or greater as having sufficient amounts of equity that causes me to say it has massive amounts. So I want a seller who wants to sell a house for whatever reason. Their loan is less than 70% of what the property's worth in the as-is condition, not the ARV condition. So once I find that person, and however I find them, whether I'm using a bandit sign, I'm using direct mail, I'm using my center of influence marketing, center of influence, which is talking to all the people that know me, my friends, my family, co-workers, my banker, my masseuse, my barber, which I don't have a barber, all those people that I come in contact with, and telling them that, hey, my name's Michael Quarles, I buy houses, and letting them know the types of houses that I buy, and that I pay a referral fee for anybody that refers someone to me. Now, naturally, mom and dad and sister and brother are not going to charge you the referral fee, but if you make it a habit to tell everybody that you do, you won't forget to tell the people that really need that to motivate them to brag about you. So I found this prospect. They have 70% of the equity or the value of the house is in a mortgage or less. Some of these folks are going to be paid off. They've called me out to buy their house. I've scheduled an appointment. I've asked them an alternate choice question: what time is better for me to come out and buy your house? Would 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock be better? They've said 2 o'clock. I show up early. I do my 6-pack of the neighborhood for the just solds and active listings, so I know what the property has to compare to. I'm doing my other 6-pack, which is around the subject property, knocking on the neighbor's doors and asking the neighbor why the seller wants to sell. I then go up and I knock on the seller's door, and I step back, look up the street, so they can become familiar with me and confident to open up the door. I step up to them when they open up the door. If it's a male, I extend my hand, greeting them and saying, thank you for inviting me out to buy your house. We go through all the process of getting a contract signed, whether I'm a wholesaler or a wholetailer or an assigner. So no matter what I am after that contract sign, I'm doing the exact same thing. So I'm finding it the same way: bandit signs, direct mail, center of influence, whatever it is. I'm interviewing the neighborhood to determine my value from a comparable just sold and a comparable on the market perspective. I'm interviewing the neighborhood on why the seller wants to sell. I've greeted the seller, let them know that I was there to buy the house today. They've, in fact, asked me out to buy the house. Let's assume for a second, after my walkthrough and my critique of the repairs that are required and my presentation, which will go into why my program is better for the seller than maybe somebody else's program. That somebody else could be another real estate investor. It could be a realtor or broker or agent looking for listings. It could be a lender who is talking to them about refinancing their house. So my peer group could be one of those 3 people. And whatever I said and the way I said it caused them to say, yes, Mike, we want to take your 70 cents on the dollar purchase price. So instantly I know that if I put this house under contract, that there is 30% value in it. So let's assume for a second that it's a $200,000 as-is value, and I'm buying that at 70 cents on the dollar. So I'm buying that for $140,000 in the as-is value. Well, quick math tells me that that's $60,000 in spread between what I'm buying it for and potentially what the open market says it's worth. Because the open market is who determines value. It's buyers who always determine value. So now what do I do with it? If I was a wholesaler, I could go ahead and sell it to another investor who wants to take that property, fix it up, flip it, or continue owning it and rent it out. When I do it as a wholesaler, if I'm not assigning the contract, which is I'm not selling the document that allows me to buy the property, I'm actually selling the property, I'm going to be selling that property at a highly reduced value. The reason that most people will become wholesalers, which is understandable, is because maybe they don't have bucket loads of money sitting in the bank to, pay the seller $140,000. So the only thing they could do is put it under contract and then sell that contract at a reduced value of what the worth value is to somebody else who has the $140,000 or knows how to negotiate with the seller to buy the property without having to have the $140,000. And they're going to pay the wholesaler or the assigner a percentage of the potential profits. So it may need, let's say as an example, it may need $20,000 worth of work, and after it's all said and done, that $20,000 is going to cause that original $200,000 house now to be worth $250,000. So now that new investor who's buying either the assigned contract or the property wholesale is now, if you add the 60 and the 30, there's potentially $90,000 of gain. And they're going to give some of that $90,000 to the assigner or the wholesaler, because the wholesaler or the assigner, they actually found the opportunity. They just didn't buy the opportunity in one case of the assignment, or they did buy it, but they didn't know how to either to fix it up or what have you. So they did they purchased it, then they flipped it to somebody else. Well, let's imagine for a second, you know how to come up with the $140,000 that you need. Maybe you have that in the bank, or maybe you have that on credit cards or retirement account, what have you. But maybe you don't. What if you didn't have it liquid, so you couldn't go down to the Bank of America and withdraw it from the bank, or your retirement account and withdraw it from your retirement account? How would you actually buy that? Well, there are several ways. In the example that we just pointed out, where the loan to value originally is 70% of the value, well, that means that they have an underlying voluntary or involuntary lien, so they have a loan. So that loan is $140,000. So I can assign the contract to somebody and make a percentage of the big piece of money, the $90,000. I can buy the property somehow and then sell the property to somebody else at a reduced value and make a percentage of the big chunk of money, which is what most people do. In the beginning of their career, most people start out as wholesalers, and it's perfectly okay and it's perfectly understandable. But let me ask you this. If I could show you a way to buy that property without any cash, without any credit, and make all of the money, so you don't have to know, as an example, you don't have to know how to do construction work. You don't have to have $140,000 in the bank. You don't have to know how to find the buyer. You don't have to know how to do all those things that scare some investors and thinking, well, if I don't know it, I can't do it. Well, the reality is, if I showed you where the $140,000 is and how to get that house under contract, how to close escrow on your purchase, how to resell that property to another investor, and not for a percentage of the spread, but for all of the spread. So you bought that $200,000 property. You bought it for $140,000. You closed escrow. You found your buyer, which is super, super easy. You negotiated a resale price, which is super, super easy. You didn't do any fixing. So you didn't fix it up. You didn't do anything to it. All you did was you did what you were going to do as a wholesaler or an assigner. You put it under contract, and instead of selling the contract for a part of the profit, which you're selling it to another investor, Now you're selling that property to another investor for all of the money, for the $200,000. So you have a $60,000 spread. Now earlier I talked about, well, how do you do wholetailing and make it easier than wholesaling? Because wholesaling seems real easy. Let's face it, you don't have to worry about fixing things up. You don't have to worry about having any money to take properties down and buy properties. You don't have to worry about understanding escrow and closing companies and all those things. All you have to know how to do, get a house under contract and have that contract represent a massive amount of money in profit. Well, to me, that's the work. I mean, if you know how to do that, let me show you how to do the other part, because the other part, pretty simple. That's the hard part. Negotiation is an extremely important part of every real estate transaction. If you've already done that, reselling it for all of the money is pretty simple. The question beckons is, how do you buy it? That is where the magic comes in. So let me give you a couple scenarios. Let's assume for a second you have the $70,000, the 70% loan to value loan on a $200,000 house. That means that mortgage is $140,000, which is your purchase price. Well, what if I showed you how to take that property subject to the existing loan, and here's the kicker, and start selling the property while you're buying the property? So you have a 30-day escrow to purchase the property from a seller. That means you have 30 days to find your buyer. And within that 30-day period, you're going to find your buyer. You're going to close, because all you're doing, stay with me, all you're doing is buying the property for what the loans are. You're not paying off the loan, you're taking them subject to. And maybe you've heard that subject to is dangerous or illegal, and it's not illegal and it's not dangerous. Let me tell you why it's not dangerous. What's the worst thing that you could do in this situation? The worst thing that could happen to you? You end up wholesaling the property to another investor, and you're right back where you were going to be in the beginning. The best thing you can do is sell it to an investor at 100% of value and make $60,000 minus your cost to purchase it, which are minimal. So on one hand, you're going to make $6,000 to $9,000 to put the house under contract, sell that contract, or wholesale that deal to another investor. On the other hand, you're going to make as much as $60,000. And I don't know. If you could make 10 times the money and do the same amount of work, actually less work, wouldn't you want to do that? Because if I do a wholesale deal and I make 60 grand and you do a wholesale deal and we're doing the same work, you're just not buying it because you're not sure how to buy it, or you don't have the money to buy it, or you don't know how to negotiate with the seller to allow you to take that house subject to. You're making 6,000, I'm making 60. You have to do 10 deals, I have to do 1 deal. I'm doing a lot less work. My marketing dollars are being spent a lot better because now I can get the cream of the crop deals. I can say, wait a second, I'm not going to just go out there and spend my time talking to everybody because I'm making so little money per deal, which is okay. I'm going to only speak to people who already know in advance. When they call me and I ask them, how much is your house worth? And they say, my house is worth $200,000. And then I ask them, how much were you hoping to sell it for in today's market, knowing that I pay cash and can close on the day of your choice? And they say, Mike, if I could get what my loan is, I'd sell it. Then I have to ask them what their loan is. And they say, Mike, it's $140,000. And then I reply, not saying I can, but if I understand you correctly, if I could buy your house for what your loan is, you'd sell me your house. And then they say yes. And I say, great. What time tomorrow, 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock, can I come out and buy your house? Get their information, phone number, name, address, all the other little things that I need to know about the house. Go out there, do my first 6-pack. Go out there, do my second 6-pack. Take 4 contracts with me. Get them to sign 1 copy. Give them a copy for themselves. I always take 4 because they just might have another piece of property, which I'm going to ask them if I don't know already. And so in that scenario, all I'm doing is I'm buying the property subject to the existing loan. And while it's under contract to close in 30 days, I'm finding a buyer. Now, how do I find the buyer? Well, most buyers of investment property are not looking to buy a property at 70 cents on the dollar or less. Most investors that buy income property pay 100 to 105% using a real estate professional and buying properties off the multiple listing service. You may ask, you may say, Mike, but how do I get a seller to sell me their house subject to the existing loan and let me put it on the multiple listing service so I can make $60,000 and I can close it the day after I buy it? How is that possible? Well, who would do that? The simple answer is I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of real estate transactions, and it's super simple as long as you know what you're doing, and the sellers do it all the time. I have never, ever bought a house where I had to go down to a conventional lender and borrow money. So that means of all the houses I've bought them two ways, maybe three. I can buy them cash. Don't buy a lot of houses cash. I buy them subject to, or I have the seller finance it for me. So if you want to go from wholesaling or assigning your contract and making a limited amount of the profit to wholetailing, don't do anything to the property. So you're buying it, you're selling it, you're not fixing it up, and you're making all of the money. Well, that's what I do. That's what I help people do. And maybe you want to work as hard as you're working, continue to work that hard, but imagine if it takes you 10 deals to get to $60,000 wholesaling, and you can turn your wholesaling business into a wholetailing business and turn that $60,000 into $600,000 doing the same amount of work, negotiating the same values, the same prices, same everything. You're not fixing it up. All you're doing is instead of selling it at a percentage of profit, you're selling it for all the profit. If you could do that, how much would your life change? Probably a lot. I know if I have $60,000 in one hand and I had $600,000 in the other hand, I know which one's my favorite hand. I don't even have to think about it. So folks, wholesaling, I understand it. I get it. I applaud anybody who starts in real estate investing, and most people will start as a wholesaler. But you're so close to making all the money, just go that extra step. Learn what you don't know, which is how to convince a seller to take subject to financing or seller financing and buy it and make all the money. That's all I have to say. I want everybody listening. If you're a wholesaler, talk to me about wholetailing and how wholetailing can change your life. $600,000 is a lot of money. Thank you so much for listening. I really, really enjoyed laying out the little difference between wholesaling and wholetailing, and that little difference huge. Thanks so much. Talk to you guys soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show. Get more info and stay in touch at michaelquarles.com.